it's always a process that I go through when I have to do these kind of standalone messages where you get one shot in 1 week and you want to try and communicate everything in the Bible that you're passionate about. And so it's always a journey to try and seek God as to, what do you have for the people today? And so approaching a sermon, if it's a standalone thing, see, this isn't necessarily what I want the church to get, because I don't know all of the individual needs out there. You know what I mean? So I know my needs, I know my wife's needs, I know some of your needs, but as far as us as a whole, what does God want to do here? And He knows that, and so what He does is He works through men like myself and through the preaching of the Scriptures to bring us to the point where He wants us to be. And so I feel very confidently that God has led us to the text that we're going to examine today in 1 Corinthians. It's a familiar text, actually. Generally, you hear 1 Corinthians preaching done at weddings and Valentine's Day, right? And so neither of which we're celebrating today. And so go to 1 Corinthians 13. We are going to talk about love. Right? So the end of 1 Corinthians 13 says, now abide these three, faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. And that's an awesome verse that we like to put on coffee mugs, right, as we're sipping our coffee, and it's just so inspirational in the morning. The problem is we all have a very difficult time living this out. I think one of the most difficult things in the church and in relationships is a biblical concept of love, actually fleshing out this type of love that we're commanded to show to one another. It's very difficult. The reason it's difficult is it requires something of us. To love as Jesus loves requires a death in you. To love the way Christ loves the church requires a death in us, a death to ourselves, a death to our desires, a death to our agenda. And so this type of love that we're going to examine in the Word of God this morning requires much of us. But this is the command of God. Love in our culture, I think, can be a confusing thing, right? So, if I can get to my notes. Come on, iPad. There you go. I can say this, all right? So follow me. I love the beach. Right? How many of you love the beach? That's your thing. You just love the beach. The first time I went to the beach, I was 20 years old, 21 maybe, I don't know. I think I was 20. First time I'd ever seen the beach. I grew up in western Colorado. There are no beaches in western Colorado. There was this lake that they had some sand on it. They said was a beach. But the first time I actually saw the ocean, I was 20 years old. And I went on vacation with the Totero family because Steph and I were dating, just about ready to get engaged. And so we went on a family reunion vacation. And I stood at the edge of the beach and I thought, wow, the ocean was massive, right? Then everyone brought their beach chairs out. They set up their beach chairs. They get their little umbrellas out. And they sit down. That was it. That was the week. I didn't get, so I'm sitting there. I'm like, what do we do now, Steph? She's like, well, we sit here. We got 7 more days of this. I got to do something. I'm not the type of person that can just sit for a week. And you know what? That week, I learned to sit and enjoy. I really did. And so I love the beach. I actually do. I love going away. Problem is I have children now. Children at the beach, they don't get the concept, because I didn't get it until I was 20, I guess. You come to the beach and sit and relax, and enjoy. And, my children don't do that, but I love the beach. And like I said, I love pizza, right? Love pizza, right? I didn't know pizza until I came out to Philadelphia, all right? Like I said, I grew up in Colorado. I don't know what they make out there. It's really not pizza, all right? Out here, you get pizza, right? Right? The kind that you have to fold in half to eat. And so I love pizza. So I can say I love the beach, I love pizza. I can also say I love my wife. Right? I love all of those things. Now, all of you sitting here hopefully just immediately understand, well, obviously the degree to which he loves pizza, hopefully, is not the same, right, way in which he loves his wife. Okay, so when I say I love my wife, the degree to which I love her far exceeds the degree to which I love pizza and the beach. All right, so but we use the word love for everything, don't we? It's just kind of we don't have different categories for love in our vocabulary. We have one word, love. So in our culture, love is, all you got to do is watch a movie, right? Like, get the latest chick flick, watch it. Love is more often than not communicated as some sort of feeling that comes over us, right? Like, I just have these feelings for this person. And so love becomes this feeling that comes over us. So it becomes more of an emotional response rather than a purposeful commitment. So therefore, one of the reasons marriages fall apart, and I've heard this for a long time, is I just don't love him the way I used to. You ever heard that before? Maybe some of you have said that. Maybe you're there today. Like I don't love her the way I used to. So just as I fell in love, I can also, I guess, fall out of love. And I have no control over this. It just kind of comes and goes, right? And so this is kind of the warped view of love I think that our culture has adopted, and I think that kind of seeps into our lives. Certainly not the biblical view of love. What happens in relationships, because we're all sinful people and we all have desires and preferences, is disagreements and divisions surface, right? And what often happens when there's disagreements, when there's divisions in relationships, what often happens is love ceases. Generally, so if you're going by just our culture's understanding of what love is great as long as we're getting along, right? Love is great as long as we agree. Like I can love you if we get along. I can love you easily if we agree. The minute we stop agreeing, the minute there's some division, the minute there's some strife, the minute there's struggle there, love tends to cease, doesn't it? When conflict surfaces, oftentimes love struggles. Sometimes love ceases or ends when conflicts arise. What we find in the Bible, however, is a very, very different picture of love. So what we're going to see from 1 Corinthians is that true Christian love requires you to die to yourself. True love requires death. Francis Schaeffer once, he put it best when he said this. He said, Christian differences are not the end of love. Okay, so I want you to get this quote because it's really powerful. Christian differences, so we're going to differ on things, right? Christian differences are not the end of love, and oftentimes they become the end of love, don't they? I disagree with this person, I disagree with this person, there's conflict, you sinned against me, well, you sinned against me, well, you lied to me, well, you lied to me, there's conflict, right? Oftentimes that conflict is the end of love, but what Francis Schaeffer says is he says, Christian differences are not the end of love, but rather an occasion for love. And that's what we're going to see in 1 Corinthians 13, is that when there are differences relationally, when we run into conflict with one another, they are not the end of love, but what the Bible says is they are actually the occasion for what is true biblical love. So go with me to 1 Corinthians. Let's read the text. The context is, if you read in chapter 12, very important. Because Paul is writing to a church that's struggling with getting along, struggling with division, struggling with conflict with one another. And so in chapter 12, he talks about the concept of the body. And so if the church is composed of different members, each member is a different part of the body, therefore they bring something to the table that others don't bring. So you are gifted by God to serve in the church, to edify and build up the church, and to accomplish the mission of the church. So God gives you these gifts. Not everybody has all of the gifts, and not all of the gifts are the same. There are so many different gifts. There's such diversity in the church. This is the way God designed it to be. They were struggling with gifts in the church because some people were like, well, I want this gift, or this person thinks they're awesome because they have this gift. And so there are gifts, I think we can agree, that are more visible, more outward gifts, and then there are gifts that are kind of people don't see. And what Paul says is they're all absolutely necessary. And in fact, you need one another, and that's the way the body of Christ was designed. And so at the end of chapter 12, read with me verse 28. He says this, "And God has appointed in the church first apostles, second prophets, third teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, helping, administrating, and various kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all possess gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret?" No, not everybody has these. There's diversity in the church, and we need these different gifts. We need this commitment to one another to exercise these gifts in the church if the church is going to function properly. But notice what he says. He says, "But earnestly desire the higher gifts." Now, I think that's interesting. He says, desire these. So there are some gifts that Paul would say are higher gifts. He says, go ahead, desire those. Pursue that. If that's in you, go for it. But then he ends it by saying, desire those, but I'm going to show you a better way. So the spiritual gifts in the church in Corinth were a source of division. And so what Paul says is, there's different gifts. You're all gifted differently. Use them. Come together in unity and use them. Some people have the higher gifts. Desire those, but I want to show you something better. Something better than that. Something that is better than the gifts. So what is this more excellent way that Paul is talking about? He spends chapter 13 explaining it, and it is love. So read with me chapter 13. I'm going to read the whole chapter. "If I speak within the tongues of men and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing." So what he's saying is, if you have all of these incredible spiritual gifts, I mean, and he lists some pretty amazing things, right? Faith to move mountains, the tongues of men and angels. If I have prophetic powers, I mean, he's listing a pretty impressive set of gifts, isn't he? And he says, if you have all of those gifts and you exercise them faithfully, but you don't have love, all you are is a guy off in the corner making a bunch of noise. You're a noisy gong. You're a clanging cymbal. In fact, what Paul would say later on is you are nothing. Like, this is a radical statement, isn't it? I think we can all agree that Paul is making a pretty important point here. That you can be exercising all of your spiritual gifts, but if you're doing it not out of love, but out of selfish ambition or pride or whatever, you are accomplishing nothing. And so if we are going to be the people that love the way that God wants us to love, if we are going to be the church that exercises true biblical Christ-like love, we got to know what it looks like, don't we? And thank God that Paul just gave this really amazing description of what this looks like. And so this is where the rubber meets the road. We all know I need to love, right? That's a command. We know that Jesus loved. But what does this look like in our relationships? And this is where Paul goes. And so some of this, as I was going through this, some of it quite honestly stings a little bit because it requires, listen, love requires us to die to ourselves. And so what is this love? What does it look like? Paul tells us, he says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast, is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I reasoned like a child. But when I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, and I love this, in the future, face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of these is love. And so if the call of God upon your life and the call of God upon the church is this love, we need to know what it looks like. And so I'm going to walk us through and I have 4 different categories here. There's a lot of different descriptions here, but I think we can boil them down into 4 categories. So number 1, we notice first of all that love is patient and not provoked. Love is patient and not provoked. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand, but I'm going to ask you, how many of you struggle with patience? Like, some people just aren't very patient people, right? Some people, it's very difficult for them to be patient. Some people are irritated rather quickly. Some people not so much. Some people have a longer fuse. Stuff doesn't get to them as easily. So on just a personality level, some people struggle with being patient, others not so much. But when the Bible says love is patient, meaning it's not easily provoked, what is it getting at? Okay, so what I want to do this morning is I want to help get to the heart of what love is and what this looks like for us on a day-to-day basis. So I'll put it this way. None of us are wired this way, to just be patient, long-suffering, not provoked. Like the nature of us is to want our agenda and to want our plans and to want everything that we would love to see happen to happen in such a way that it's comfortable and it's easy and there isn't a lot of bumps in the road, right? So when we plan a vacation, right, we love for that plan to work out well. We love to have the vehicle packed up by 7 a.m., for the kids to be in the car by 7:10, right? You know, some of you are more type A like this, you know. Others of you are just like, you're just throwing stuff in. You're like, get in the car, you know, and it's like, you know. And so your goal is to leave, you know, for wherever by, 8 o'clock, and it's like 8:30. And, you're still throwing bikes on the back, and you're, right, like, and then you realize you haven't changed the oil in 8 months, and so, so you're like, oh, I got to change the oil, and then you get on the road, and you realize your tires need air, and or this was my favorite right here. And when I moved out to the East Coast, I wasn't totally prepared for this. Summertime. So those months of June, July, August, during the weekend, you get on the I-95 corridor, you don't move. Like, you're like, yeah, we're going to make it down there, and then you're stopped. Like, why are we stopped? I have no idea, right? And so what happens is we like for things to go smooth. We do not like to be interrupted when things are going well, do we? We absolutely do not like it when things are interrupted. We do not like it when things do not go according to our plan. And oftentimes, what gets in the way of our plan are what? Other people. And we all struggle with this, because at the end of the day, don't we all struggle a little bit with the feeling that we are kind of the center of the universe? Like, let's just be honest and admit, I think at the end of the day, this is something we all kind of struggle with. Like our plans and our agenda we have going on is the absolute most important thing in the world right now. Like, and I'll prove it, okay? When you're driving and you're trying to get somewhere, get out of the left lane. Why are they going that slow in the left lane? Move over, move over. Pet peeve of mine, right? Get out of the left lane. If you're going to go 20, do it in that lane. Let me blow by you. Anyone ever been cut off before? What I love is when we get cut off, the person who cut us off is automatically an idiot. And I'm idiot, moron. Don't they know who I am? Don't they know I have somewhere to be? Right? Like I was in Buffalo on a vacation this past summer, a few weeks ago, and it was amazing because I don't know Buffalo at all, and I needed to get over, right? So I put my turn signal on, and I got over, and I cut someone off. They're so nice in Buffalo. I mean, I had 3 people waving at me with one finger as they're driving by. I'm like, and I'm like, don't they know that? And I'm sure they're in there. I mean, they were just not happy with me at all. And so what happens is when we get cut up, but when we cut someone else off, it's because we had to get over, right? Like I had to get over. So it goes both ways. And so what happens in life is we get interrupted. People create issues. And if we have this mindset that what we are doing is the most important thing, that the world will stop spinning if this doesn't get done, if I am the center of the universe, then what happens is we neglect love, don't we? We neglect patience. We become easily provoked. Listen, guys, I know what it's like to come home after being at work for 10 hours. And all you want to do is sit down with that remote and just watch the game. Although with the way the Phillies are playing, maybe you just want to do something else, but that might make you more provoked. But you just like how many of you have been there? You know what I mean? And for those of you ladies that are working too, like you know what it's like. Like you come home and I just want to, right? But what happens? Daddy, 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 right? Like there are days where I've come home from work and I've worked hard. I've been up since 5. I've been, dealing with issues. I've been doing this or that. And I come home and my wife is like, deal with him. All right? Why can't you deal with him, woman? I've been at work all day, right? And so what happens is that I come home, and if it's about me, if it's about my long day, I'm going to become easily provoked and easily irritated with my children, with my wife, with everything going on. If it's about me, and I don't understand what love is. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is long-suffering. It's not easily provoked. If I don't get that, if I don't understand that, when I walk in that door, I'm not going to love my family well. Listen, you show me a dad who after a long day of work, and he's beat, and he's tired, and he walks in that door, and he gets on the floor, and he goes after the hearts of his kids. And he's tired, and he's spent, and he takes on the second shift and pours into his family. Sits down with his wife who wants to know every single detail about his day. And he has no interest in rehearsing every single detail of his day. That he sits down and he rehearses every single detail of his day. You show me that kind of a guy, and I'll show you a guy who gets love. Who says, it's not about me. I'm not the center of the universe. It's about me coming home and going after the hearts of my children. It's about me pursuing my wife. And when she comes home and says, deal with him, I come home and I deal with it. Moms, those of you that stay at home, listen, I get it. Now, I know you're sitting there saying, no, you don't. No, I do, actually. I think I do, because I have 4 children, and my wife stays at home with them. And there have been, I think, 2 or 3 times where I've had to do that, like all day. Man, you ought to get an award like every day. Like your husband should come home and give you something. Because what you do is, like, I'm honest, man, it's really hard. It's difficult. But listen to me, moms. Listen, and I'll brag on my wife here for a minute because she gets this. Does she get provoked at times? Yeah, have you met my kids? I'm telling you what. Once she got to the point where she realized, it's okay if the laundry piles up a little bit. It's okay if those dishes aren't done when I get home. That if she can go after her kids' hearts, which she does ferociously, pour into them. Man, my wife, when I come home, she's frustrated if she doesn't have a meal waiting for me, and I don't care. I'll cook when I get home. But my wife displays this patient, long-suffering love. I believe she does, which is what makes our relationship and our family work. Do we do this perfectly? I'm going to be honest with you. There are days when we don't get this at all. There are those days where it's come home, deal with him, and I'm like, but when we get this, when we die to ourselves, when we cease to become the center of the universe, we realize that we're spent, we're tired, and that there is much that God has called us to do, and that if we will only invest our time and our energy into what God wants us to, realizing that it isn't about what He wants to accomplish in the hearts of my children, when it's about what He wants to accomplish in the life of my wife, when it's what He wants to accomplish in the life of the church. So what if I'm cut off in traffic? What if my children zap my time and energy? What if the church... And you fill in the rest. You see, there's going to be people in the church that will, quite frankly, annoy you, bother you, zap you of time and energy. I mean, there are people in the church, I'm going to be honest, that are absolutely, they just kind of suck the life and energy out of people, right? Like those people, you're like, oh boy, I just, here we go. Like if I talk to them, it's going to be 30 minutes, and they've got a bunch of issues, and I'm going to have to, right? Or whatever. But if we cease to become the center of our universe, and we place Christ there, then we can be patient with one another. We will not be provoked by one another, but rather we will love as Christ did. Second thing, love does not brag. Love is not arrogant. So love does not brag. Love is not arrogant. You ever met someone that was arrogant? Those people are awesome, aren't they? But we all have this, don't we? Like, we all struggle with that. Like, I do sometimes. And sometimes it's just passed off, he's just confident. No, he's arrogant. It's pride. Well, that's just confidence. Okay, you can be confident, but you can be arrogant. We all struggle with this. So I'm not going to say, well, I don't struggle with that. Yeah, you do. Why? The nature of our hearts is this. The nature of our sinful hearts is we all love to be made much of, don't we? Like, we love for people to notice all of our wonderful accomplishments, but not pay attention to any of our failures or weaknesses, right? So we love people to notice us. We love people to see what we've done. We just love that. And when someone actually notices and someone takes notice, which is fine, like, that feels good, doesn't it? And I'm not up here saying that that's wrong. Like wives, when your husband notices that you've gotten that new haircut, like when that actually happens, and I don't know how often that happens, but you got the hair done, right? Like, honestly, how many of you got the hair done, your husband came home, had no clue? But when he notices, like, man, woman, you look good. Did you get your hair done? That feels really good, doesn't it? It's like, well, yes, I did. Like, it feels good. You ever come home and your husband is like, why are there dirty dishes in the sink? Because I couldn't get to it, right? And all of a sudden, okay, so we didn't get the job done. And so we want people to notice our strengths, make much of us, but not so much about our weaknesses, right? This is how we all are kind of hardwired coming out of the womb, aren't we? So when the Bible says love doesn't brag, I think it actually is two-pronged, okay? So let me explain it this way. First of all, on this side, love is not puffed up with our own achievements. Like, there are some things that you guys, quite frankly, you guys are really good at. Like, some of you have some incredible gifts that are just awesome. And you like people, and we like people to notice those, right? Like we love it when people notice that we're good at certain things. Like, that feels good, okay? But love does not boast in our achievements. You ever notice someone that's always talking about how much they're doing? Well, I do this, and I do this, and well, I do this, but nobody notices. Well, I'm just serving, and nobody notices. And in the church, this happens all the time, because 90% of the jobs in the church, nobody will notice. So Jamie gets up here and says, serve in the nursery. The most thankless, non-noticeable job in the church, which is why nobody wants it. So thank God for those women that are down there this morning. Like we like to be noticed. So love does not boast in our own achievements. Simply love serves and pursues and could care less whether anyone notices or not. The problem in the church is we want people to notice, and we want people to appreciate us, and we want people to pay attention to us. Don't we? And I've been serving, and I've been doing this, and nobody said thank you. Nobody's noticed. And look at all the... Love says, I will do it whether anyone notices it or not. Love, on the other hand, does not, on this side of the coin, get too concerned with our hurts. Now, this isn't something that I think we're driven to a lot of times when we think about love. And we think about, okay, so when I'm talking about pride and arrogance, what I'm wanting is I'm wanting that spotlight right on me, right? And so there are two different ways in which we get that spotlight. We just talked about one. Look at what I've done. Another way in which people get the spotlight is, look how much I'm hurting. You ever known someone? Every time you talk to them, it's always about how much they're hurting and how much they're going through and how much they're struggling. And I'm not here to diminish the hurt that is out there. My goodness, there's hurt out there, isn't there? There is pain that every one of you dealing with, emotional, physical, struggles, trials. I know they're out there. But what love does not do, love does not say, put the spotlight on me. Rather, love says, take it off of me so that I can minister to others. You ever known someone that was struggling? You knew they were struggling. You knew they were hurting, but they just had this aggressive desire to meet the needs of other people. You ever know someone like that? Like, I don't even know if I have a category for that. Like the person who has cancer is ministering to this person over here struggling. Like, I've seen that happen. It's like, that blows my mind because that person gets this, don't they? So listen, if you're hurting, and I know there's pain out there, love does not say, shine the light on me. Everybody needs to know about all my hurts. Everybody should know so that they can pay attention to me. Rather, love says, yeah, I'm hurting. Yeah, I've got some pain. But how can I take this amazing grace that Christ has given me and help someone else who's hurting and help someone else who's in pain? This is true love. does not boast in his own achievements, nor does it make too much of his own hurts. So this type of love is others-directed. That's the point. This type of love is others-directed, not self-directed, so that at the end of the day, this self-exalting, attention-seeking desire must die in us. So first of all, we must die to our own agenda, to be provoked and lose patience. Secondly, we must die to this attention-seeking, self-exalting desire. We have to die to that. And then number 3, love does not insist on its own way. We all have a way of doing things, don't we? We all have a preference, don't we? True Christian love does not seek his own private preference with no regard to the good of others. Let me say that again. True Christian love does not seek his own private preferences apart from the good of the others. And this is hard. Because just as we noticed before, love seeks the good of others, in the same way, love says, you know what, I do have preferences. I do have a way of doing things. And that's the thing, your way of doing things is a way, it's not the way. It may be a good way, but we all have ways, right? And so when we understand true Christian love is others-directed, in other words, it seeks joy, not in getting what I want, but true Christ-like love finds joy in others. It finds joy in the good of others. So you will absolutely be miserable in life if you don't get this concept. If we go through life constantly focusing on our preferences, you're going to be miserable. Because most of the time, you're not going to get your preferences, whether it's at the job site. Listen, you go to work, you got to do things you don't want to do. You got to serve with people and work with people you don't want to work with. You got to do things a way that, quite frankly, is a dumb way of doing it. But that's the way the boss says to do it. And so what true love says is, I don't have to have my own way. Rather, I'll find joy in the good of others, in others finding joy. And so what God is asking for us to do at times is to set aside those preferences for the good of the body, for the good of the family. Listen, and I'll go back to my family again, because this is where it hits home for me a lot. 8 years ago, we started having children. We've been having children ever since. But I'm done now, so. Man, my preference, when I had kids, and Titus he starts growing up, and my preference is not to watch Thomas the Train. I'm just telling you, not interested. My preference was ESPN, that works. Comcast Sportsnet, that one worked too. ESPN 2, ESPN News, ESPN 5, whatever. I don't know how many ESPN channels there are. ESPN Soccer, okay. So there's my preference. If I love my son, if I love my children, and he comes in and says, Dad, I want to watch this ridiculous cartoon. Sure, buddy, we can watch that. Sure. In fact, change the channel, get a blanket, snuggle up with me, we'll watch it. When it comes to getting the movie, my wife and I don't always agree. We have different preferences on the movie. And I think I still struggle with this one, so I'm not going to say I haven't achieved in this area at all. Because when I go to the the box, the red box, I get the movie. I always get what I want, so I haven't achieved in this area yet. There is occasion where I'll get what she wants, and then we'll watch it, and I'll be like, "See, I told you that was a retarded movie, right?" And so. As a silly illustration, though, if I'm gonna love my wife well, man, I've got to die to my preferences. Because I'm telling you what, her and I are different. Like, we've got some different preferences. How in the world can two people come together that are so different and make a marriage work for the next 50, 60 years? How can that happen? They get 1 Corinthians 13. That if this marriage is going to work, God's got to kill my preferences, and I've got to serve this person. If the church is going to be what God has designed it to be, listen, church, we have to get this. That God's trying to kill in us this desire to have our own way so that we can lay that on the altar, sacrifice it, come before God and say, God, I want your way. That's hard to do, isn't it? But you show me a church that gets that, and I'll show you a church that's going to do something amazing for God. And so when love seeks not his own, but true love desires the good of others, we allow God to kill our desire to have our preferences, then love happens, relationships are built, and the church becomes strong. And lastly, and I'll quickly move through this one and then we'll be done. Love does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but in truth. Now, this one seems easy, doesn't it? Like if you're saved, and I take a poll out there today, and I say, hey, how many of you love wrongdoing? I don't think anyone's going to be like, yeah, I love wrongdoing. So I think we can, on the surface, look at this and say, hey, I think I got this one. I hate wrongdoing, and I love truth. So on the surface, I think we could all probably line up right there. This is where, when I had to really examine this, is this true across the board for me? Because what true love does not allow is for someone that you really love to continue in wrongdoing. See, oftentimes love is veiled in that we're always nice to everybody. Love is often veiled in the fact that we never confront anybody. So the minute I confront someone, well, that's not love. When in fact, the opposite is actually being communicated here, that true love recognizes wrongdoing and says, if you continue in that direction, it's going to kill you. It's going to destroy you. None of us who have children, when we see them heading down a path that's going to destroy their lives, if we love them, does not step in and confront and discipline and deal with them, right? Like true love for my children says, stop! You're doing wrong. Rather, walk in truth. And so someone who truly loves their children will try and keep them from walking in wrongdoing. Why? So that they can be directed and taught how to walk into truth. And so we get this with our children. We need to get this with one another in the church. Because what often happens is this: we see someone struggling, or we see someone walking away from the church, we see someone living in sin. Oftentimes it's like, well, they haven't been in church in 6 months. No wonder they're, oh yeah, look at them. Oh yeah, did you hear? Yeah, they're struggling with immorality. Or did you? And oftentimes what happens is gossip happens in the church. And we see people walking down roads of destruction, and we do nothing to help them out. And what true Christian love does is it says, hey, bro, man, I'm just seeing some things in your life right now. Like I'm concerned because I love you. We need to have a hard conversation. See, sometimes the epitome of Christian love is seen in those hard conversations, isn't it? Like the height of Christian love is the willingness to say, hey, I know this may hurt our relationship, but I love you too much to allow you to continue. So to have the courage enough to intercede on behalf of a brother or a sister, to have that hard conversation. Maybe there's some relational drift there. Maybe there's some conflict there. What love says is love says, I want to have that hard conversation because I rejoice in truth, and I'm not going to allow our relationship to be fractured over something that is based on wrongdoing. So maybe someone did sin against you in the church. Maybe they did lie about you. Maybe you were stabbed in the back. And what happens is because we don't love properly, we get angry, we get bitter, and those relationships fracture, and people leave the church, and people get angry with one another. But if we can get this, what will happen is when you are sinned against, when someone does hurt you, when someone doesn't display this love, is that we'll be able to get with them and say, hey, that was wrong. And I want to have that hard conversation with you because I love you. Man, maybe I've been struggling with bitterness. Maybe I've been struggling with anger towards you. But I want to have that conversation because I rejoice in truth. And I want our relationship to be based on truth and righteousness. And so I'm going to have that conversation. And I'm going to rejoice when you walk in truth. And I'm going to rejoice when in our relationship together we walk in truth. And so at the end of the day, every single one of these descriptions of true Christian love requires a death. A death to your own desires, your own preferences, your own agendas, your desire to be made much of. It requires you to die to that. And so when differences arise, when conflict surfaces, it is not an end of love, but rather you can see now it's an occasion for love. So true Christian love is seen in our desire to serve, not for our own benefit, but to spend your life serving for Christ for the good of others and the good of the body. So I want to direct you to the cross for just a minute, because we read in Philippians where it says of Jesus, who being in the very form of God, did not look at equality with the Father something to be held on to or grasped. But rather, Jesus did what? He made himself of no reputation. Who modeled this for us greater than Jesus himself? The God of the universe said, I'll become nothing. I'll become a lowly human, a lowly carpenter's son. I'll do that. I'll wrap myself in human flesh and become weak. So who being in the form of God did not think his equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself of no reputation, took on himself the form of a what? Say it. He took on himself the form of a, say it again, servant, and became obedient unto death, even the death of a cross, the most demeaning, shameful execution possible. God himself did. This is the love that he's shown us. This is the love we show one another.